Guys, we're here today to go over Garchomp in what I think will be the best sets to use when Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl OU drops. So if you guys enjoy, of course, leave a like below, subscribe if you're new, and with that said, let's just get right into it. So with BDSP OU dropping this Friday most likely, we do need to of course know how to use one of, if not the best Pokemon to come to the tier, because you're not going to have that long to use it. My guess is that Garchomp it'll either probably go unbanned entirely, or it will probably be banned within the first 2 weeks. It's probably going to be one of the best Pokemon allowed, unless they potentially allow Speed Boost Blaziken, but even still, I think there's a lot of Pokemon in the meta that are specifically going to be targeting Blaziken that are very viable. So we might see that actually stay around before Garchomp, but who knows? I thought Blaziken was going to be one of the first bans last time around, and it lasted longer than Zygarde. It's not even in OU right now. With that said though, the first set of course should be the first Garchomp set to touch the field, being a Sash Garchomp. So I thought that this could be a pretty good Garchomp to run. It's Stealth Rock, Earthquake, Dragon Claw, and Swords Dance. It's a pretty popular set depending on the metagame. Like for example, if you play Battle Spot OU, this is a pretty popular set. It's lasted a couple times in OU depending on the generation. But overall, I think this is probably the weakest set of the four, but it is still a good set nonetheless if you're going to throw Garchomp in the beginning. With the typing of Dragon Ground, you can do some really good early game damage to this Pokemon and then maybe set up for something else. Especially if you're going to go with Dragon Spam, this would probably be the Garchomp set to use in my opinion, because you could then kill whatever Dragon check is on the team, and then focus for an endgame Latios, or a Latios, or I guess Dragonite and Talbot's, but I would probably be going with Latios or Latios if you're going to do Dragon Spam. Overall, I think this is probably one of the weaker sets, but realistically, Sash Rocks at least guarantees you're going to get Stealth Rocks up. If you go for Swords Dance and set on turn 1, depending on the lead, or depending on how weak your opponent's team is to rocks, because Team Preview will be back, so even if you're playing on Wi-Fi, that's a factor you'll still have the knowledge of. Overall, that Swords Dance turn 1 could be very important instead of going for hazards. If your opponent's team really has a lot of good removal options, why bother wasting the turn when you're a Sash Stealth Rocker? So, all in all, this could be a pretty good Garchomp set depending on how the meta shakes up. I personally think this will be the weakest one, but I do still think this is one to be afraid of nonetheless. Next up, we have one of the most terrifying Garchomp sets in my opinion, and I think if any Garchomp set gets it banned, it's going to be this one. We have Berry Time, the Salac Berry set. This set is Substitute, Swords Dance, Earthquake, and Stone Edge. Now, Stone Edge could easily be opted out for Dragon Claw, but I thought that Edgequake just in general was really good. I personally have this coverage actually on one of my day 1 teams, but ultimately it's really up to you which one you want to do with this. I thought that Stone Edge would be the best because if you're going to go with 2 attacks in general, you kind of do need something to at least remotely damage Skarmory. Dragon Claw would not be that move choice, though to be fair, if you paired this with like a Magnezone, Skarmory is not really an issue at that point. So that Dragon Claw or Stone Edge slot could really be either or. It really just depends on what team you're going to go with. My team really just needed something that was going to be able to at least do slightly more damage to Skarmory though, even if it's not ultimately my best answer to it by any means. With this set though, this set ultimately is a really good late game Garchomp as opposed to our early game one with the Sash Lead set. Basically what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set up a substitute on whatever Pokemon is out in front of you. And you really just want to fish for that Salac Berry because that will help you with late game cleaning against the majority of Scarfers, and you also won't even need to lock into a specific move. With Swords Dance as well, depending on if the opponent can even break your substitute or not. Let's say, for example, your opponent turn 1 goes for Toxic as you're going to go for a substitute, and they underpace you, they've now wasted their turn, and they've given you a free Swords Dance. Which is really the beauty of having Substitute in the set. I think that it really does help a lot, and I know that might be something that seems very obvious, but between the fact that you can actually delegate how much damage you're taking, and specifically fish for 3 substitutes, it's all you need, and it will guarantee pop your Salac Berry. In fact, that's exactly why you have the 12 HP here. The max speed is that way then you can outpace, or at least tie any sort of Garchomps that are max speed as well. And then you have, of course, the max speed ultimately is mostly important for Scarf Garchomp at that point, because once you do pop your Salac Berry, you do want to make sure that you're going to tie Scarf Garchomp in that case scenario. Which, again, is another reason you could potentially run Dragon Claw. It really doesn't matter for that last move slot. But ultimately, the 12 HP, though, means you are divisible by 4, which means that you're going to take 3 substitutes that are full exactly 90 HP, and then the 4th one, you will not be able to actually do a substitute because your Salac Berry will have popped and you will have 90 HP left. Which means if Substitute, for whatever reason, actually did activate, even though it doesn't activate at that point, but if for some reason it did, it would take you out. So you go for 3 substitutes, you're at 90 HP, your Salac Berry pops perfectly, and you are in for a sweep. You could technically go for more HP, however, you do want to make sure you're divisible by 4, because otherwise you need to go for 4 different substitutes, and you're going to end up with like 1 to 3 HP left. This sort of spread would at least help you live potential Aqua Jets. Probably not for like a Bandit Azu, but I would imagine you would love a banded, non-banded Aqua Jet at the very least from Azu. But in general, it's really good for just taking priority hits, because something like an unboosted Dragonite, for example, maybe it has like leftovers E-Speed with Dragon Dance, you're probably going to take that. Now, I don't know the exact calcs to be fair, but worst comes to worst, you could probably also just delegate some more bulky EVs depending on how your team is optimized, because this could honestly just substitute on a lot of other Pokemon as well. So the bulk is definitely negotiable, same as the attack, but the speed being max speed Jolly is really important for this though. So yeah, ultimately, I think this is probably going to be one of the best Garchomp sets. It might not be the exact attack and HP EVs, but at the very least, I think it will be a number divisible by 4, and it will have the rest of the EVs, regardless, thrown into attack. It really just depends on your team comp at that point for how bulky or offensive you do go with this, though. Next up, as I mentioned, we have the Scarf Garchomp. This is a meta staple until Scale Shot happened, but Scarf Garchomp will always be a viable Garchomp, in my opinion, just because it's immediately faster than a lot of Pokemon. This is being faster than base 100, for example, so you can guarantee outpace a Scarf Jirachi, which will probably be a fairly common spread, though Jirachi losing out on Iron Head is actually pretty bad for Scarf Jirachi, but it doesn't really make the entire difference, because you can still go for Scarf Zen Headbutt at the very least, as well as Meteor Mash as a physical steel move. So you do still want to be prepared for those Scarf base 100s. Other Pokemon that could potentially be concerning would be things like maybe Mew, for example, though in general, Mew probably, I don't think Mew gets Dragon Dance anymore in this set of games, so probably less so Mew, but also Salamence is another big one you want to be prepared for. With this spread, we are Earthquake, Outrage, Fire Blast, and Dragon Claw. Now, between Outrage and Fire Blast, you can make that any two combination of the 3 moves being Outrage, Fire Blast, and Stone Edge. However, personally, I feel like Stone Edge is probably the most giving up. It's the easiest one to give up, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Because Fire Blast is very important for Skarmory, since otherwise you're getting pretty hard walled. And when you're locking to a specific move, Fire Blast is also very important for Pokemon such as Scizor, such as Magnezone. Though Magnezone, to be fair, you do have Earthquake for. But it is still very useful in general nonetheless. I would honestly probably just go with this exact EV spread. There's really no reason to go with anything else. However, maybe there's a slightly more optimized calc for like a 2-kill on Fire Blast. I assume this one already does it. In fact, I'm almost certain it does. However, I know for a fact that if you were to run Flamethrower, you would definitely need more special attack. But if we were to pull up, let's say, a Garchomp right here versus Skarmory, and we go for Fire Blast, yeah, right there with Naive Garchomp just versus Fizdef, you do actually guarantee the 2 at KO, at least on Helmet. If you wanted to guarantee the 2 at KO on Leftovers, you only need 8 EVs actually, so that could actually be something worth throwing in, to be fair. They go on a 248 attack and 8 special attack. This would guarantee you 2 at KO versus 252 HP and 4 Speed F. However, at the same time, giving up 4 attack, it might not be the best idea, just because I know it's a very small amount to give up. But to be fair, you're probably going to primarily click a physical move, and at the same time, you can always just fish for burn. Fire Blast does have that burn chance, though to be fair, you also have the miss chance, so it really just depends on what you value there. Personally though, this is at least a very good option if nothing else. In general though, Scarf Garchomp will definitely be a very, very good Pokemon in this metagame. I think that a couple things though that do kind of concern it, as opposed to let's say an SD Salac set, will be Pokemon like Gliscor as well, which, while they were already good Pokemon, they'll be making a huge resurgence this metagame, because of the fact that Gliscor now gets Poison Heal, so it is something you definitely want to keep an eye out for. It's going to finally make that Toxic Orb and DPP viable, so I would definitely take this with a grain of salt. Scarf Garchomp will definitely have a place in the metagame, but I think that ultimately SD Salac, or even Sash Lead, or our next Garchomp, will probably at least be easier to use. This one's a lot more forgiving though if you pair it with something that's going to really handle Gliscor. So that's Pokemon like Weavile, for example, though Weavile got heavily nerfed. But even still, Pokemon like Suicune could be very good partners with this, or Swampert could also be another good partner with this. So just something for Gliscor, though, would be really important if you're going to use this set, because at least with Skarmory, you do have Fire Blast. On our final Garchomp of the day, we have another lead Garchomp, though this one isn't necessarily just specifically a lead. This is Fat Garchomp, with Stealth Rock, Dragon Claw, Fire Blast, and Earthquake. Now, normally Tank Chomp runs Toxic, however, because of the fact that it lost Toxic, it lost out in the Tank name, in my opinion. We're not going to go for alliteration with Tank Toxic. We're just going to name it Fat Chomp now. Call it what it is. It's a fat Pokemon. With this spread, though, you're going to be creeping Timid, or I guess Naive, but probably Timid, Nidoking, which I thought was very important, you know, just generally creeping base 85s. You could go a tiny bit less Fizz Def and just go for Adamant base 100s. However, that's really going to depend on how the metagame shapes up. There are other viable Pokemon for sure to be creeping in between that mark, but ultimately I do think that this is at the very least a minimum you do need to be hitting. because this outpaces things like, for example, Timid Suicune if offensive Calm Mindsets make a return, which could always just go for Ice Beam on you. This goes to outpace things like Nidoking, most importantly, though, which could go for Ice Beam on you. So just Pokemon like that, I think is very important to actually be creeping. Can't really think of a ton of Pokemon that would probably be running a Modest or Adamant base 100 that would be max speed. Though, to be fair, there might be something. Maybe you want to creep Scarf Rotom at the very least. That's only like 8 EVs more. Well, not Scarf Rotom, but like a fast Plot Rotom, for example, Rotom Heat. That would be 8 EVs more, so you could definitely go for that as well. It really just depends on what you value with the speed, but I do think that at the very least you need to be hitting the 120 mark. Though, the rest of the EVs, you could totally just go for the max HP. Really doesn't matter. But the point of this Garchomp is basically to be taking hits. This is great for Pokemon like Heatran, for example, because even if Heatran does happen to Will-O-Wisp you, you're still able to go for an Earthquake and probably Massacre it, because I can't imagine how, even without attack stat, that Heatran would actually want to take a hit from a burned Garchomp going for Earthquake, because it's just going to do so much damage. And even if it takes 1, it's not going to really like taking 2 Earthquakes. There's 0 chance of that happening. So there is definitely a lot of merit for stuff like that. Other Pokemon that could be very good at being tanked by Tank Chomp would be non-Ice Punch Jirachis, which is very great because Jirachi also lost out on Ice Punch this generation. So you could actually be invested to take on Jirachi if it's physical, which is honestly also very important because of the fact that Jirachi will probably be one of the most common Pokemon that's here, even with all the nerfs that have happened. Other things that are really good that you could actually check with this would probably be things like Skarmory, because of the fact that you do have Fire Blast. Now, I do still recommend you go with Jolly Nature because of the fact that your point of the set is to take hits, not weaken down one of your defensive stats. So I would still recommend the Jolly Nature. However, Fire Blast should still do a good amount of damage nonetheless. Ultimately, though, I think this will probably be a pretty good Garchomp. I imagine this is probably the second best spread you could run this gen. However, this still does play into a lot of the similar Garchomp issues, being Gliscor, for example, which will probably be one of the biggest issues for Garchomp because of the fact that Gliscor will also probably be one of the best Pokemon in the tier, as I covered previously. Hopefully, though, you guys did enjoy this video, and if you did, leave a like below, subscribe if you're new, and with that said, I'll see you tomorrow with another BDSP guide. Peace out, guys.